Ask your doctor or pharmacist if Pharmacodynamics has an affordable generic suitable for you.
Welcome back. In South Africa, post-traumatic stress disorder is common owing to our unusually high rates of violent crimes. A study done at UCT found that over a third of the South African population has been exposed to some form of violence, and that 1 in 5 South Africans experience PTSD, with women more than twice as likely as men to get it. Not the nicest of subjects to discuss, but we can't just ignore something because we don't like talking about it. Essentially, post-traumatic stress disorder is an immediate or a delayed response to a traumatic event of a life-threatening nature, such as a natural disaster, serious accidents, and acts of violence. It can also develop, though, in witnesses to a traumatic event. Typical symptoms would be reliving the event, flashbacks, nightmares, memories, avoidance of people, places or things associated with the event, and hyperarousal is the third symptom, like anxiousness, people who are jittery, panic attacks, and difficulty concentrating. Remember, these symptoms are considered normal in the first month after a traumatic event, but if they last any longer, we start to think of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder goes hand in hand with people who work in the emergency services sector. Today we're at the Vosloorus police station, where we're going to chat to some officers about not only the violent and traumatic experiences they go through, but also how they recover and continue to do the good work that they do.
For every atrocious story in the papers, there's a police officer who's expected to take up the case and deal with the trauma head on.
Captain, would you be able to tell us about one of the instances that you experienced that caused you to go through post-traumatic stress disorder?
Is when I attended the case where the father wanted to take his life with his child, a 14-year-old. But there was a time that there was a huge strike, of course, SADU and everything, so there was no ambulances to come and help me there. I managed to take the child out and take the child with me in my office and get the father to the hospital.
With you, how has it affected not only yourself but your family?
You know, after attending all these things, it's like when you go home, you can just go straight to your bed. You feel not talking to, not even watching the TV. You really take some part of that incident with you to home.
Do you ever fully recover from the experiences that you go through?
Every time when you hear of something happening, even if it's not your police station, that thing that you've attended, similar to that one, it comes back.
What advice would you give other police officers and also people in the community who have experienced traumatic events?
People must not sit at home until this thing is becoming out of hand. They must go for help. They can come to the police station, they can go to the social workers, and then they will refer them for counseling.
Most police stations offer free trauma counseling when you report a case.
With every traumatic experience, like a brutal killing or domestic violence that a victim goes through, it's so important to remember that a police officer is right there witnessing and experiencing the same trauma.
Wow, God protect the men and women that protect our lives from crime. Liz, post-traumatic stress is considered a normal human reaction to a traumatic event, but when does it become a disorder?
Well, you mentioned those 3 different symptom types, the hyperarousal, the avoidance, and the re-experiencing. And essentially those are normal immediately after the event. But we look at a cutoff of a month's time usually, and that those symptoms start impacting on your ability to engage with your normal everyday life and become distressing and traumatic for you in the long
So once
term.
it starts affecting life's functions,
exactly.
Not a good idea. How common is it?
Look, it depends on the type of trauma, and often with more severe traumas, you're going to have a more likelihood of getting PTSD. But on average, they say between 20 and 30% of people exposed to a trauma will develop PTSD.
Wow. And what about our policemen and women? I mean, they experience trauma on a regular basis, so it's almost continuous, traumatic stress disorder.
Well, I think they're exposed to chronic low-grade trauma, and they also have specific incidents that are more traumatic. So they can get classic PTSD related to one particular incident, but they can also get a more chronic form of PTSD. And that often manifests as more of an emotional numbing. And that emotional numbing can lead to depression. It can have physical symptoms like pain and fatigue. And often they get an underlying anger or irritability that then gets taken out on the family.
Sure. What happens if we don't treat PTSD, if it goes undiagnosed?
Well, look, I think it goes undiagnosed because particularly in those environments, for example, the police force, people don't want to talk about what's going on. So they don't talk about their symptoms and they don't know that other people are experiencing similar things. And second of all, people don't even realize that somehow they've changed. You know, they get this emotional numbing, they're somehow different, but they don't see it for themselves. So it doesn't get treated, and then the symptoms get kind of more and more entrenched, and then it becomes more and more difficult to treat.
How do you treat a disorder like that? I mean, that just seems to have so many facets to it.
Well, look, it's good to know that it's easily treatable, particularly if you pick it up quickly. So I think the first thing is always to approach someone if you're having symptoms and get a good diagnosis. And then treatment is really on a kind of medical, biological side and on a psychological, therapeutic side.
Can we prevent PTSD?
You can do things to help yourself after you've been exposed to a trauma. So some of the things that I would recommend that you do are, I mean, first of all, to make sure that on a physical level everything's okay and you know that you've taken care of yourself after the event, so you've done what you need to do. The second thing is to talk to people after you've had a traumatic event, and I think people are often reluctant to talk about it, but that repeating the story kind of re-exposes you to the trauma, so over time the anxiety around it gets less and less and less. And the other thing is in terms of avoiding the place where it happened. People want to do that, but it's very important to re-expose yourself to those things, to know that it's going to be anxiety provoking, so prepare yourself, take someone with you, give yourself time to be there, give yourself time afterwards to talk about it and go through it with someone. And then the other thing is just to be vigilant, and if you need treatment, to go and get it.
So get back in the saddle, so to speak,
No,
in reference to what you said
absolutely. But with care and with support from people around you, I think.
I think that's key support. Liz, thank you so much for those insights, as always. Untreated PTSD can have devastating, far-reaching consequences for your well-being and for your family. So if you've experienced trauma and recognize the signs and symptoms that are still there after a month, please go and see your doctor or visit a website, sadag.co.za. It's not only our minds and psyches that are sensitive to violence, but on another tangent altogether, our gums too.
Ask your doctor or pharmacist if Pharmacodynamics has an affordable generic suitable for you.